everyone, and welcome to our panel, Fact or Fiction Live, here at SCGCON. Our panelists today,
Ryan Overturf.
Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
I do commentary for StarCityGames.com on the SCG Tour. I'm actually in the middle of a show right now.
This guy was just live on Twitch. Next to him,
I was live with Matthias. I was live with this guy, also, same spot.
all right. And then,
I'm Jonathan Rosum. I write for Star City Games, and I am sponsored by Team Lotus Box, and all I do is play opens.
all right, cool. So this is the Fact or Fiction panel. These are statements that were submitted by our viewers, people that went to the website scgcon.starcitygames.com, submitted these statements. I will be reading the statements, and then each of these panelists will tell me fact or fiction, if they agree or disagree with it, and why. They're pretty, there's a couple that are pretty good in here. So the first one comes from, I hope I'm reading this right, Cedric Phillips.
I think it's Cedric.
Cedric Phillips, who posted on Twitter, Unified Constructed is the worst format in Magic. Ryan?
Fact. So I have a lot of thoughts on this, actually. I've been prepping for the team RPTQ, and it seems like we did away with a lot of formats that have a lot of the worst things in common with Team Unified, where it's kind of neat that there's a unique puzzle. There's some unique problems with this standard format where you have a lot of colorless cards that you want to put in a lot of decks, and you have this imposition where there's really two decks you want to play, like blue-white or blue-black, red deck, and then you have third deck, and all the third decks are bad, and they have to beat the good decks sometimes, which is like horribly exclusive to this format, but it also has things in common with Extended and Block Constructed that we moved away from because nobody follows these formats, nobody cares about these formats. You have deck lists for one weekend and they just don't matter.
Okay, Matthias?
So I'm gonna go fiction. I kind of half agree with it and half disagree with it. The part that's bad, which Ryan is hitting on, is every time we have these Team Unified Constructed formats, it's like we have Team Unified Standard, but it's a really different format than Standard. And this happens every time we have unified rules because good decks share cards, and you end up getting these weird decks that aren't supposed to exist. So like we played Team Unified Modern in San Antonio like almost a year ago. For example, every team in Modern was playing like KCI or Affinity or Colorless Eldrazi because, hey, those don't steal very many cards, and that was just like a staple of every team. And you're gonna see a lot of that same stuff happening now. It's really strange because right now in Team Unified Standard, like every team has a red deck, a blue control deck, and then a bad deck. And so you hang out with your team friends and you're like, okay, one of us got to play the bad deck. And the bad deck's actually like bad against both the other two. So, you know, that's just kind of where it is. I really like team constructed formats, and so that's where my mix is. That's where I'm going to say fiction on it, is because I want to get people out and playing team constructed formats, and I don't have a better way to do it. And even despite all the weirdness, and all those restrictions, I'm still really looking forward to playing the event.
Okay. Jonathan?
I'm going to say fact, and I'm going to start this off by saying, have you looked at the standard format and then tried to make 3 decks that don't share any single cards with each other? You get mono red, you get a control deck, and you get some unplayable green deck. That's kind of what it looks like right now, and that's kind of the issue I have. It's just that a lot of the games, as like Ryan and Matthias were saying, is that you have this deck that is not good against the 2 best decks that people are going to bring, but you have to hope that it sometimes wins games, and it kind of leads towards you can't really add as all the cards that you want to, so you're actually just like weaker to archetypes like blue-white because only one deck gets duress, or like only one deck gets like all this like discard or aggression or whatever colorless card you want, like Karn, and you actually lead towards like decks that are just like very weak, and it's just not a very fun format to play.
As a follow-up to this, do you believe that there have been any standard formats in recent memory that would actually make for a good unified constructed standard?
Mono black, mono blue, Sphinx's Revelation.
There you go.
Every team would have been those 3 decks.
Yep.
One team would have registered monsters and they would have been wrong.
But only one of the teams gets to sideboard, like one of those players gets to sideboard gainsay. So like your Blue Devotion
That's
deck,
rough, that's
or your
rough.
Sphinx Revelation, you have to
Yeah.
share that. It's like, that's a problem.
All right. Okay. So, next statement. Fact or fiction? Planeswalkers were a mistake.
I think I'm going to say fiction because mistake, when I say the word mistake, I mean like you shouldn't have done that thing. you want to push the envelope with design. You want to make new card types. You want to change the way the game plays. There are issues with Planeswalkers. It's cool when both players are doing their thing and you go back and forth. That's what players really like. You almost never see two players both controlling a Planeswalker and making inroads on their strategy. It's usually like, I cast my Planeswalker and then I won the game. This is a very good card. Or your opponent answered it and then you don't have a Planeswalker anymore. So they're almost never squaring off. I think that the positively influenced gameplay, you get more decisions every turn. That's really cool. There are specific Planeswalkers that are mistakes. Jace the Mind Sculptor was a mistake, flat out, but I think as a card type, they're pretty cool, and I would disagree that they're a mistake.
Okay.
I'm going to go fiction. Planeswalkers are super fun. I really like casting them, and I think that outweighs most of the negatives they have. I think when we first started out, we were not particularly good at like balancing them. So you look at some of your first Planeswalkers like a Johnny Goldmane who has one really cool ability and two things that are completely worthless. Some of the original Planeswalkers are costed wrong, but by and large I think they've been really cool for constructed. I'm going to give them a bit of a bad grade because I think they were I wish we could remove them from limited formats. I think by and large Planeswalkers in draft and sealed are just not a good experience.
Okay, Jonathan.
Yeah, I'm also going to say fiction. I think that well-built Planeswalkers are actually very healthy for formats because they're very good at balancing. Planeswalkers like Jace the Mind Sculptor and like Liliana of the Veil are just like Planeswalkers that just are too powerful for the context of their format. Whereas Planeswalkers like Teferi Hero Dominaria, wink wink, is actually just like very healthy and very good design Planeswalker.
Okay. I forgot to mention at the beginning, and since there are a few more people here, if you do have any statements that you'd like to have them do fact or fiction on, please come up to our director area and they will get you an index card and write it down, and we will get that one up here if we can. All right, fact or fiction. Mental misstep needs to be restricted in Vintage.
Is who cares an option? I
There you
guess I guess fiction because like why bother? Why bother with Vintage? You can still play 4 workshops. So I guess my answer is who cares?
I'm going to make a fool of myself in this question. I do not play enough Vintage on this. I'll say fiction. A lot of zeros are almost as good as ones when we're talking about Vintage. And a lot of, there's some decks like Shops and Dredge where Misstep doesn't even do anything. So I'm going to very tentatively say fiction.
I've watched and played a total of 0 Vintage games, but apparently Shops is the best deck, and it doesn't counter anything in Shops, so I'm going to say fiction.
It counters Soul Ring.
Oh,
and if
my
you
bad.
have one that lines up.
Oh, perfectly.
Really
Yeah. That's good deck building.
Soul Ring's one of the good ones.
All right, so one of the cards that has been in the forefront of people's minds recently, especially due to the Pro Tour recently, has been Goblin Chain Whirler. Nicholas Packard stated unbanning cards in Standard would be a better option than banning Goblin Chain Whirler.
My gut says fiction because the only question I have is what card are you unbanning? Why does it make the format better? People like it when you unban cards because you get to play with more cards, but why? Why do we want to play with Smuggler's Copter? It's very explicitly too good. And it's just good in the Chain Whirler decks too. So the Chain Whirler deck gets better, and that's probably the best shell for it. So why does this help anything?
Okay.
So I'm going to go fiction on this. I actually think as when it comes to banning and unbanning in Standard, I would rather they not unban cards in Standard ever, because Standard cards only have a 2-year lifespan. So I get it. I bought a playset of Smuggler's Copters. They got banned. I took a hit on that. I didn't ever assume well, maybe in the last 9 months of the legality, they're going to unban them again, and then I'll have to pick them up again if I didn't, once I got rid of them, or, with such a short lifespan, I would say just once you put on the ban list, leave them there, let them rotate out, it's fine. Goblin Chain Whirlers, maybe let's talk about banning it, but I don't really want them to start unbanning cards in Standard.
Yeah, I'm also going to say fiction. I don't think you can actually unban anything in this format that is good against Chain Whirler that doesn't make the format too degenerate.
Most of the cards are mono red cards already.
Yeah, I mean, Sahili. Felidar Guardian, anybody?
Okay. Yeah.
But my issue is that they banned Rampaging Ferocidon.
That looks so bad.
And then they print Goblin Chain Whirler. And one card is just way better, way better conceptually than the other one. And I literally am just thinking imagine if the mono red deck, instead of having Chain Whirler, it had Rampaging Ferocidon. Would it be as good as it is now? I think the answer is actually no. I just don't think it's true at all. So I would say fiction.
Yeah, with regard to the framing of the question too, Ferocidon's the one card. The optics are really bad. this card is banned and Chain Whirler is, like, in many ways just better. But what does unbanning Ferocidon accomplish if Chain Whirler is still available?
Would you even cut on Crop Crashers for it, or are you just like you're just gonna like register your same list and be like, what red's great?
Broken
I wanted
3-drop mono
to
red.
use this one specifically because of the way it was worded. It was worded in such a way that makes you think, is there anything that is going to be able to fight Chain Whirler? Because people have been talking about we should ban Chain Whirler. That's been the big question.
Yeah, so you can fight Chain Whirler, but that's like creating a bigger monster to deal with the Hulk. You're just destroying cities for no reason.
Yeah.
It's just like, what if there was another broken deck that beat this deck? Wouldn't it be better if we could like lose to Felidar Guardian again?
Right.
I blame
Like,
Kaladesh.
when you print so like when you print a set where one of the top 5 power cards on rate is a card that costs red, like guess what? Mono red's gonna be really good now, and that's just I don't know. They said that we're set up for this, and that's.
The joke is it's been really good.
Right.
All right, so here's actually one I think is pretty good. Wanja Huber wrote in, Wizards of the Coast should go back to the old PTQ system. Right?
It should is strong, I think. I think reevaluating the current system is better than going back. I'll say fiction for that reason. RPTQs and PPTQs don't work in a lot of parts of the world. I think that this system's like pretty good for me. I enjoy that if I want to play a small tournament on a Saturday, that option is usually available. That's not true everywhere in the world. It's not even true everywhere in the United States. I mean, there's some states that get a very small number of PPTQs, whereas you'd be able to at least drive to a PTQ if you wanted to qualify, they were happening, and you just had to win one tournament. As far as one tournament to qualify in one day versus playing 2 tournaments, I don't think that either system can be said to be better than the other. So I don't really think that if that's your argument, you have any legs to stand on. I think that getting the most magic, getting the access to more players is what you want to do. Like making less populated areas, having better access to PTQs, I think should be your goal. And the old system, I guess, is better, but I'd rather have a new system than going back to the old system.
Okay. Matthias?
Strong fiction on this one. I really like the PPTQ and RPTQ system. And I know a lot of players who did really well with the old PTQ system don't like this as much because this, and I'm someone who, had my time on the Pro Tour on the old PTQ system. And this system's worse for me, and I think that's okay. I think there's a lot of different ways that people want to try to qualify for the Pro Tour. And there are some people who have the ability to travel each weekend, whether that means driving to a Grand Prix, flying to a Grand Prix, or in a lot of cases, if you're doing regular PTQs, you were driving 4 or 5 hours each way to play one. And for those people, now that we have an increased number of Grand Prix, what this system is saying is if you want to travel a weekend for an event, you should travel to Grand Prix. And in that sense, like if you want to try to get, like that was even true in the old system, if there was a PTQ and a Grand Prix the same weekend, the Grand Prix was the right decision. It's actually easier to qualify on Grand Prix. So for the people who really want to qualify and get those one-shots, we now have a lot of Grand Prix. And then there's players, which I'm finding as I get older, I'm more in this situation where I don't really get to travel on weekends, and I don't have time to travel. So like if there was a PTQ, say 4 hours from my city, I'm not going to go to it anymore. But when there's one like 10-minute PPTQ from my house, I'll still play one of those. And like 4 times a year I get a shot at a Pro Tour. And that's actually, I think, the market of people who are playing the PPTQ, RPTQ system, and then the people who are playing the old PTQ system, there's actually a lot, like they're different people. And I like what the current system is that both get to qualify.
Okay.
I honestly think the answer is it depends. For me personally, I think that the old PTQ system would be way better than PPTQs. I honestly just don't have the time to like go do a PPTQ and like go play like the RPTQ on certain weekends because of how I travel and how I would rather go to any like Grand Prix or Open or like Invitational over that event. And I find myself finding days that I could like out of a weekend where I can go to or like just log on to Moto and play a Moto PTQ. Where I think that if there were like IRL PTQs, if you consider yourself like a mid-tier grinder like myself and you enjoy traveling and playing competitive Magic, then I think the old school PTQs are better for you than PPTQs.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying is kind of true. I think the current system is really like not designed for you at this point, but the hope would be that there's enough other stuff that you still can qualify.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, our next statement is, Magic will soon need a format that exists with the card pool between the modern and standard formats. So this is something that's been brought up, but partly because of the the Magic Arena, MTG Arena, I think is like been
Frontier is what we're looking at, something
Frontier
like
has
that.
been one suggestion, things like that. There have been multiple suggestions of something called Eternal, starting at a different time point. So the statement is, there will soon need to be a format that exists between Modern and Standard.
Does this statement include the word non-rotating? Is that term
It does not.
part of it? Okay. So I guess I'll say fact in the sense where Modern is becoming way less accessible, not just in terms of how expensive it is to play Modern, but just the knowledge, the access, like the barrier to learning how to play a Modern deck proficiently is very high, and it only gets higher as more time passes. I actually really liked Extended a lot. I think Extended is a solid format. Players don't like rotation so much, but if you just make another non-rotating format, that you keep like making this happen every X years, and that's not something you really need to do. Like the formats just get kind of weird. Don't really like that, but another format between Modern and Standard is becoming like you almost need to level up from something that's more difficult than Standard to actually get into Modern.
Sure. Matthias?
I'll say fact. New formats are great. The longer Modern's been around, the more Modern's starting to feel like Legacy. It's going to keep going that way. You know, you're going to get combo decks in Modern that are going to feel like, for someone who just grows up playing Standard, and then like you play your first Legacy tournament, and you think, "Whoa, was that? These decks don't even feel like Magic decks." And like Modern's just going to creep into that realm. You know, we're going to get more decks as we have more time. We're going to get more decks like Ad Nauseum or things that are just like really off the charts. And yeah, I think at some point having to reset that is going to be a good call. I don't know if it's this year, whether it's 3 years from now or 10, but yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Okay. John?
I'm going to say fiction because of my very minimal experience with Frontier and looking at Frontier. It just kind of looks like a mess. It feels like a mess. Like there's like too many cards and there's too many powerful cards that everything that you're playing feels degenerate. And now I agree that I think Modern is a very difficult format to like understand everything that's going on. But I think like Modern specifically, just playing games lets you get what you're going to get what you put into Modern. And all I do is like grind Modern on Moto, and I might be a little bit biased, but I think it's a format that you can actually learn and you can capitalize on your knowledge and like just with the flex slots in your deck that I think are very rewarding. And the issue I have with like a Frontier again was that I think there's like too much busted stuff. So if there's too much busted stuff in this new format, it's just not very fun. It doesn't make for very competitive games.
Are you familiar with the concept of a banned and restricted list?
I am. Can you show me the Frontier one?
Yeah, Frontier was poorly managed. Very poorly managed.
I guarantee you, whatever the new format is, for the first like year of it, the banned restriction
Oh,
list
it's
is
gonna be
gonna
awful.
wrong.
Oh, it's gonna-
Remember
it's
like
gonna
in
be
Modern
awful.
that Bitter Blossom was on the first banned list.
Wild Nicottle?
Yeah, that was banned for a bit.
Ancestral Visions. Let's just keep
Yeah, there's
naming
much-
cards.
yeah, you know, like Green Sun Zenith was fine. Yeah,
All right. The next two questions are sort of linked. They're both from John Jeffrey. The first statement is, holding the Pro Tour further from the set release is a better experience for the pros.
Which pros? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think
the players that are playing in the Pro Tour is what I would assume.
I think that is fact for people that are not on any of the super teams. I think it's fiction for the 50-odd best players in the world because they're better able to capitalize on a new format. In general, though, I think that not catering to those players is great. I like the idea of anybody that qualifies for the Pro Tour is able to compete, so pushing it out is better for, say, your RPTQ winners and what have you.
Okay. Matthias?
I forget which way was the fact and which way was the fiction.
Fiction, it's holding the Pro Tour further away from the set release is a better experience for the pros.
Half fact and fiction, depends which pro we're talking about. I think one of the things, the Pro Tour rewards a really specific skill set, and especially they used to have it when I was playing Pro Tours. It was even more extreme, where it would be release weekend, Pro Tour next weekend, and the set wasn't even on Moto at any point between that. So you'd show up and like people are drafting the Pro Tour, there'd be like their 4th lifetime draft of the set, and there was a week where we just like try to somehow find product to open, and now people show up to the Pro Tour and they have 20 leagues with their deck and 70 drafts in. And so the kind of people who are going to be rewarded from that are just different people. You know, I for example, found that like when I was in a format, when a format was really new, I won a lot more. And then like once it started going on, people would catch up to me and then eventually just pass me. So like, I think I do a lot worse than this. But I know there are some players who I think conspiratively are like, especially the kind of players who are really great at week-to-week metagaming. Like Jerry Thompson for a while actually had some pretty weak Pro Tour results because week 1 wasn't his best week, but I bet if you move it out 5 weeks, like he is way better at Pro Tours now.
Okay. Jonathan?
Yeah, my answer is very similar to what Matthias and Ryan said. I think it's better for the people like your RPTQ winners and worse for like your pros, like your Platinum pros and your Gold pros. I think Platinum pros and Gold pros are way better at learning a format very quickly and capitalizing on people's inexperience with a format, and that gives them an edge in formats like this, where Pro Tour is being pushed way out. It's like a lot harder, it feels like, to innovate, especially with like a standard format because of
not worth it.
Yeah, you just already have the, like, look at the blue-green card deck, for example. Like one or two people had a 7-3 record and everybody else was just like, just not existent. Like, you can't, it's harder to innovate in a format that's been out for so long versus a format that's only been out for like a week. Like, for that example, that blue-green card deck would be way better in a Pro Tour format that was like a week after the set release, because people just wouldn't be on their radar that would be a deck.
The red decks wouldn't have been as good. They would have been they would have been probably like 8 cards different in the main, and the sideboards would have been half different.
They're just all tuned. They're just all tuned to the point of where like this is the best deck you have to play.
Yeah.
Okay. So in a similar vein, John Jeffrey also asked, or also stated, holding the Pro Tour further from the set release is a better experience for the viewers.
This one I'll say fiction. My favorite thing about watching the Pro Tour over the years has always been seeing what people could come up with. And what people came up with, John Rosum was talking about the blue-green Karn deck. It was a bad deck. Like, that's not exciting that they came up with a bad deck. If everybody's decks are a little bit worse and innovative, you at least see a lot of cool new things, and fewer people have the red deck is worse, you get to see more decks, and that's what I care about as a viewer.
Yeah, fiction. The last top 8 was 7 out of 8 decks were red, because red is the best deck in standard. And if you hold it farther out, that's going to happen more often. It's not just that. Have you noticed a lot of times in the recent Pro Tours, we've had top 8s that are one deck, and it's not just the most recent one. It's actually, look at the last 2 years, there have been a handful of them. I think moving the Pro Tour out is going to make that happen more often. I think if you look at when they moved up the Moto set release, so that Moto released the day after the pre-release, ever since they did that, Pro Tours have had less deck diversity, and I don't think that's a coincidence.
Okay. John?
Fiction because of lack of innovation.
Okay. All right. So the next one is, sets should be produced to add new cards to Modern without entering Standard. So I assume this is outside of something like just adding a few cards to Commander or one of the other supplemental products. So this is specifically that there should be a set that is produced designed to add cards to Modern.
So it'd be like if we could play Battle Bond in Modern, something like
Correct.
that.
Yes.
I'm going to say fiction, and my argument is True Name Nemesis.
Yeah.
And it's not better than every card in Legacy, but the experience is so much worse because it's a fake magic card from a stupid set, and it just ruins games, and it feels way worse. Like, a cool deck is Lantern Control, because people discovered it from all these draft commons over 15 years, and that's awesome. I don't care if you don't like it, it's awesome.
I just want to point out, you said a cool deck is Lantern Control, and we had 2 people leave immediately. Good. So, just pointing that out there. Matthias?
I'm okay with it. So the side of, we could release sets that do that. There are cards that are needed in Modern, and sometimes especially there's cards that, for price reasons or for metagame reasons, I want to reprint in Modern, but you just can't do that to Standard anymore, and I don't have a problem with it happening.
Okay.
I think reprints are fine, but if you design a set that's only for Modern, you better make sure it doesn't mess up the format, because it is very easy to do that when you just make up a bunch of new Modern cards. It could be very easy to produce a card like True Name Nemesis in Modern, or not 3-1 protection from you or whatever, from everything, but you could definitely make a card that is just way too good for the format, and it would definitely make it very volatile.
Okay. All right. Next is Brian Durkin says, there are ways to sustain and maybe even grow the player base for sanctioned Vintage and Legacy without repealing the reserve list.
Fact. I mean, obviously printing more cards on a power level where there's decks that are accessible. An example of this in Legacy is Death and Taxes. There are 0 cards in most lists, or a very small number. I guess Caracas is on the reserve list, but there's almost no reserve list cards in that. So if you make more powerful cards that are viable in this format, then you can increase your player base, certainly. I mean, I also just generally don't think the reserve list is going anywhere. So obviously, like if you're going to grow them, you need to come up with a different solution. The only way that I can think of really is to try to like make new cards that inspire new archetypes. In general, the decks will probably need some small number or maybe even a large number of reserve list cards to exist, even if you do make more powerful cards. Obviously, Deathrite Shaman is part of an absurdly expensive 4-color control deck. But you can introduce more cards to the format that give you more options for less expensive decks.
Okay. Matthias?
You know, fact, we can probably get more people playing Vintage and Legacy. The reserve list isn't going anywhere. And I know that I feel like the question is hoping that that's going to happen, but it's not going to happen. So maybe we can increase the player base. The prices are going to keep going up with the cards, and I don't really know how to stop that one from happening. And that's going to be, like, you increase it by some, but probably not by that much.
Okay. Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm going to start this by saying, obviously, the reserve list isn't going anywhere. But the issue I have with printing more powerful cards is that I do enjoy Legacy. Like, whenever we have like a stop at the SCG Tour, I actually get very excited, and I actually test a lot for it, and I just like enjoying the games of Legacy. The issue is, I don't know what cards you can print that are on the same level as Grixis Delver or 4-card Leovold without having the dual land access. I just don't know what you can play in the format without being able to use these dual lands and be able to be like Ponder, Delver, Gurmag Angler kind of decks. Like, I feel like it's really hard for players to get into the format because of the barrier to entry it has. It's just way too high, and you can't reprint the cards that make the format good.
Well, one of the decks that's actually sprung up, I guess there's two that are pretty good examples with recent cards. It would be the Blood Moon Prison deck.
8 Sun? Like the 8 Moon or whatever the deck's called?
Yeah, just like Blood Moon, you have to buy City of Traders. It's a reserve list card, but it's a very small number. You don't need Underground Seas or anything like that. And Colorless Eldrazi. It's actually like a pretty real deck, and you need very few reserve list cards for it.
But the best deck in the format is Grixis Delver, right?
Yeah.
So you just don't have access to the best deck.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
that's
someday they're going to ban Deathrite Shaman, and the format will be better.
One day. One day.
It's probably like 5 years from now. Like they let miracles fester for like 5 years, so it's probably that kind of timeline.
Mm-hmm. All right, since we're kind of on the banned lists again, let's talk about those. The current build of Blue-White Miracles in Legacy proves that Sensei's Divining Top was not the reason for the deck's success.
Fiction? That's like a really weird claim.
Yeah. I feel so as well.
There's a different deck that doesn't play Sensei's Divining Top that is also good, but it's really hard to deny the power level of Sensei's Divining Top. If the statement is more along the lines of, I don't know, Terminus would have been a better ban, Counterbalance would have been a better ban, you can make that argument. But like, there's this other deck that's also good that plays a lot of the same cards, doesn't really say anything about the power level of Sensei's Divining Top. Like, Blue-White Miracles right now is a very good deck, but it's not the best deck, which Miracles obviously was.
Okay. Matthias?
I mean, so I remember there was a similar situation back when Caw-Blade was in Standard, and they banned Jason Stoneforge Mystic, and there was a Grand Prix the next weekend, and the winning deck was blue-white aggro with Squadron Hawks and Swords. Just the same deck without either of those cards. Now, does that mean, oh, the deck was good, so we didn't need to ban Jason Stoneforge? Like, no, the deck was actually so good that you can remove these cards and it still wins a Grand Prix. So no, I mean, Sensei's Divining Top was really good. It was good. The deck was so good that even when you remove one of its best cards, it still can win.
Okay. Jonathan?
Fiction. Have you ever cast the card Portent? And have you ever cast the card Sensei's Divining Top? And let me tell you, they are two completely different Magic cards, and one's more busted than the other.
That's fair. So there's a couple of specific ban questions. Laura Blooney, I want to say is how it's pronounced, loyal player of Modern Elves, says, unbanning Glimpse of Nature would be fine for Modern.
I guess I'll take a page out of the Patrick Sullivan book and say fact but unwise. It's the kind of card that maybe you can unban it and it'll be fine, but why risk it? Because if it's good, it's definitely too good. Elves is already a deck that has some very favorable matchups and can snowball kind of insanely on turn 3. And it's still going to be bad against a number of decks, but adding a card that draws every card in your deck to the format is probably not a good idea.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of agree with that. I'll say fact. A lot of the cards in the Modern ban list, actually from a competition point of view, I don't think the Glimpse of Nature is the only one. There are a lot of cards that actually would be okay to unban. For example, I know it's a deck that I know, like Summer Bloom, I don't even think it would be that good if you unbanned it. It'd be fine, but, you know, like, the deck's still like still's never going to beat a Blood Moon. But at the same time, like, okay, so what would you do? What does it do if you unban it? Oh, I mean, people are going to lose the game on turn 2 way more. Is that something we want? No, not really. So we could unban. I think Glimpse is going to be in that same category, where I don't think it would screw up the format. I don't think Elves will suddenly be like the tier 0 deck winning every Grand Prix. You know, if you need to kill a bunch of X1s, you can do that in Modern. But I don't see why we'd unban it.
Jonathan?
I'm going to say Fiction just to the point where I think Elves is already a really good deck in Modern. I think it's actually criminally underplayed, which is very odd because it has very good matchups against the best decks in the format, like excluding decks like obviously Jeskai Control, a little bit biased, but it gives you the grinding capacity against those decks, where I just think that it would actually put Elves over the top because you just get to refuel your hand every single time. It's a must counter, and if you don't have that answer, they're going to have 5 permanents on the battlefield with 7 cards in their hand, and that's kind of I think it's just kind of unhealthy for Modern.
It would fix some of Elves' combo matchups, like they could
That
just
is
try
true.
to race them instead.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see, what else do I have here? Stoneforge Mystic should be unbanned in Modern.
I'm sure I'm going to get dragged for this. Fiction. I'm very against Stoneforge Mystic. I've played with the card quite a lot in Standard and Legacy. And it doesn't just always win the game. The argument people have against it is your opponent Kolaghan's commanded you and then you're behind, but you lost your 2-mana play. That's not a huge cost to you. You also drew a card, so the 2-for-1 is just undoing your 2-for-1, and you just get access to Batterskull for 2 mana, which runs away with a lot of matchups. And it's not just Stoneforge Mystic is beating your deck. It's the fact that the Stoneforge Mystic deck loads up on Spell Pierces, Lightning Bolts, Path to Exiles, and also stops you from playing Magic at all, and then has a 2-mana win condition that's very robust and very good. Whereas right now we have stuff like Young Pyromancer that plays a similar role, but is obviously much worse. You Lightning Bolt it, it's gone, there's no problem. Whereas Stoneforge Mystic leaves some stuff behind that's very powerful. Very good rate, and I think it's just, it's even if it's fine for the format, the gameplay is not interesting, and it homogenizes a lot of white decks. It's really hard to not play Stoneforge Mystic if it's legal.
Okay. Matthias?
So we said this is the fact says we can
Stoneforge
unban
Mystic,
it.
yeah. Should be unbanned.
I'm a little worried to make Jeskai too good, but I'll go on a limb and still say fact with it. There's a lot. I think the card is on par with what you can be doing in Modern. It would be very good and see a lot of play. It would change the format. I don't think it would break the format open. Problem is that Jeskai is already a tier 1 deck right now and would definitely be interested in playing the card. But when you look at a deck like Grixis Shadow, for example, I'm not, there's a lot of decks. That's a fair deck that I think could deal with Stoneforge pretty reasonably. Like, they can push a 1-2 and kill you before you can start hard casting Batterskulls.
John?
That's actually a really hard question because it's definitely something I've been thinking a lot about, which is very strange because I've had the question brought up to me, and I think I'm going to say Fiction with the caveat that for the love of goodness, please leave Umezawa's Jitte on the ban list. Just please leave that card on the ban list. I think that a lot of the decks in the format are actually capable of beating that card.
Jitte or Stoneforge?
Stoneforge Mystic. I don't think they're, yeah. So I think that if Stoneforge Mystic was actually unbanned, I think it would actually be fine. I think I could very definitely bite my words on that and the card just being way too good, but I just feel like that it just doesn't do enough where I don't think Batterskull can take over the game by itself, how Modern is currently laid out.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go with one last question here. I know we're going to finish just a little bit early, but there are several questions here that I actually want to save for our future Fact or Fiction panels, since we are doing one tomorrow and one on Sunday. So the last question is, or the last statement is, Matthias Hunt gets his commentating power from his hat.
That's a good question.
But this is very obviously a fact. Why would he wear a hat that looks like that if it did not enhance his intellect or abilities in any way? It is certainly a mystical item, possibly cursed.
Fact.
It's just...
What did you just ask me?
So Matthias Hunt derives his commentating power from his hat.
Sure.
All right, so
That's what I got.
Where can people find you online?
Me?
Yes.
Awesome_Rosum. Follow me on Twitter. I say it every single day. AWESUM_ROSUM. Follow me. I also stream. Same thing. So
There you go.
at MTG Matthias and frequently on the SCG streaming page.
Okay.
You can find me on Twitter at Ryan Overdrive in about an hour. You can catch me on Twitch at SCG Tour is the
Yes.
channel.
Twitch.tv/SCG Tour. I'm glad he knows where he works. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. And that's it. Thank you so much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your SCGCon.